Good morning, world. Yes, it is morning time. Sun's out. Nice little after rain, crispy chill in the air. Perfect for the shorts and the long sleeves weather right now as we surprisingly come to the end of May. Yeah, tomorrow's the last day? I don't know. But it's morning. And I was thinking, language is really interesting for a lot of different reasons. But for one of the reasons that I'm thinking about now is like the phonetics aspect of it. Because, there's written language, but then there's also spoken language. And I feel like spoken language is way more mystifying and unique than written language is. Although written language is very fascinating because it makes you wonder, like, how did people create a system of symbols, and each of these symbols represents like a specific noise or function or definition, and for that to be able to be comprehended and widely distributed is fascinating. But before there was written language, there was spoken language. And I heard somewhere, I might have been on YouTube, which, is the most credible source in the world, but that in some fantasy, I want to say it was Game of Thrones. Maybe it was because I was reading it this past week. Shout out to The Sword of Storms, which is the third book in the series. Also, somebody get on the line with George and tell him that he's got one job to do, and that job is to please at least drop 4 books. These dogs do not sound happy. Anyways, he was talking about the book, and in the book, I want to say that Dothraki is a language that was phonetically similar, or maybe it was one of their fantastical languages, was that the language was spoken the same but written differently amongst like different tribes. And I thought that was just fascinating, that sometimes we have written language that sounds different even though it's the same word. And then on the flip side, we've also got hold on, my foot. Oh, okay. Little ankle cut, which is really frustrating because it's the tiniest little thing, and yet every single step that I take, I can feel it. Just a reminder that the human body is mad faulty. Similar to how language can be faulty at times. I've come up here and talked about, the concept of communicating before, how it exists in 4 parts. The interpretation from thought to language to being spoken to being heard to then being reinterpreted by the listener. There's a lot of room for mess ups and mistakes in there, but it still is even just interesting that we use words and breath and the concept of air and these subtle noises can become things that literally bind us together as a human species. Like the simple curvature of my lips at a particular junction while exhaling or inhaling or making a distinct motion with my breath is what creates conversation. Like, can you wrap your mind around that? Also, can't my mind around this tree being here, because this was definitely not here the other day. Yeah, it's so interesting that language exists like that. And I find myself really drawn to language as a writer and big time reader. Just the way that we construct these the the way that we construct our sentences, the way that we construct our words, the way that we construct conversations. Like, there's so many different routes and avenues, and over the thousands of years, we've developed like multiple systems of language and communication. And each culture, was able to create its own, something that is often like very distinct from others, and yet simultaneously is utilizing almost the same materials and resources that we all have access to. There's some tribes that, I don't want to say tribes, but there might be some communities that speak through words like we do. There were probably societies that did not use full words and sentences like this, but might have used a combination of like whistles and hums and notes and grunts and throat ululations, all those things. And yet the common denominator amongst all of it is utilizing the human instrument as the tool to communicate. And yes, this thing is an instrument. It's not just a body. It's not just a vessel. It is also a thing that produces noise. Oh my gosh. Do you think about how much noise your body produces? Here's a confession, but I'm a farty old man in the morning. My body wakes me up and is like, hey, you know how we're going to start this day? We're going to release some noise. And that's how the day begins. And then on the other side of my body, my mouth, I'm releasing noise as well. And it's just so funny to think that that's all we are, is just these bags and tunnels of air going in and out. And based on the way that we warp our orifices, determine how we, that could determine us communing with another human being. That's just so funny. I'm sorry, I'm geeking out. I'm a little exhausted and sleep deprived. But to go back to this concept of like the bizarre nature of language, I have studied, and I won't say that I have mastered any of them, but I have studied a few languages in my life. We've started with English, born and raised to know that, and then Spanish, learned a bit of Mandarin in undergrad, picked up a bit of Japanese, took Latin in high school. So what I've been able to do with all that, again, is maybe not having mastery, but I have an understanding of language systems. And wow, you want to talk about something that is fascinating. Building the system of communication. Like, I know nobody really likes grammar, but I find it so fascinating that grammar rules are different for each language. How some might put the subject, verb, object. Others might do subject, object, verb. Some might have to end with a particular sound. Like in Japanese, you're ending your statements with a desu. And like eventually you can take the desu out when you're in conversation, but that is like actively saying period, almost, in a way. Like if you were ending a sentence and I had to say, yes, that is my name, period. If we had to do that every time, we as English speakers might be like, that's weird, but to Japan, that is how you complete a clause, at least initially, and then you can eventually drop it. And it's similar with them asking questions. And this is something that is similar also in Mandarin, is having a particular phonetic sound that denotes, now I'm asking a question. So I've said words to you, but depending on my last sound will determine if you think that it's a statement or a question. And that little difference, do you know how massive that is? Because the response of the other person is going to vary based on if they feel like they're being asked something or they're being told something. And that's just one example. Again, over the many courses uh, of human history where language has been a thing. And it makes me wonder once again, like, how did it all come about? Who were the first individuals to start muttering sentences and putting things together that way? And I want to say some of the anthropologists and historians believe that it was children who were pretty instrumental in the creation of like an actual spoken language. And when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense, because what do children do? They make a lot of noises with their mouths. They make a lot of blabbering sounds. They're actively trying to like talk and communicate, but they don't have a vocabulary. So it's kind of cool to think that maybe children help create the concept of vocabulary, repeating similar things that kind of stuck. And also, I want to say I was reading something that was really fascinating about language, how certain sounds that we produce give you a certain feeling, like a like manual, magical, macro. Like that MA sound has a sense of like power to it, as opposed to an op, oppressive, operational, observation. That itself is different than a fancy, factor, fail. I don't know. It just, again, the way that ages ago people sat around and made noises and then eventually started to recognize certain patterns within the noises and then would attribute that noise to a certain thing. Like, oh, that tone means happy, that tone means danger. And animals have that in the animal kingdom, but for us to advance that baseline foundation and build it up to where not only is it a noise, but it's a whole statement. And not only can we, the difference is that not only can we communicate about like a threat and say like danger nearby, eagle above, snake on the ground, we can now say the snake is right there. It looks like this. It might be this kind of snake. Or the eagle is up there. It's floating around, but I don't think it sees us. Or this and the that and the third. So we're able to do more than just announce. We can describe. And once language started to describe as opposed to just announce information, I think that's where conversation and direct communication really started to come alive. Because when you learned how to describe a thing, you were all of a sudden able to now tell a story. Because isn't that what a story is? It's a combination of announcing and describing a particular event. Whereas in the beginning, you might have been able to say, there's a snake on the ground. Or danger, snake. Now, by the campfire at the end of the day, when people are asking, how was the hunt? You can say, the hunt was great. I saw a snake in the grass. It was blue and yellow and had flickering tongue. Its eyes looked at me and I looked at its eyes, and in the eyes of the snake I saw something. And then boom, right there, that has now gone from, again, announcement to description. And what it has even gone from is from description to the foundations for a myth. Because then somebody might ask, what did you see in the snake's eyes? And learned this week from the book Sapiens, but there's a lot of belief that primitive humans were animists, meaning that they believed that everything had spirits. So when somebody asks, what did you see in the snake's eyes? They will say, well, I saw the spirit of such and such, or I saw the spirit of this. And then that spirit now takes on a quality that isn't just a snake, but now it is the spirit of a snake. And when you have both, when you have something that I think is physical but has a spiritual relation, it it makes it transcendent. Woo, you know, it makes you transcend in a way that you might not normally, because it's no longer just a snake. It's a snake with a snake spirit. And then you have to ask yourself, like, do I honor this spirit? Do I avenge this spirit? Do I do anything to this spirit at all? And the way that I'm going to do something to the spirit is if I do something to the physical body of the snake. So, should I do something to the physical body of the snake? Am I ready for the consequences of interfering with that spiritual energy and entity? And again, this is all something that may have just came from somebody describing the snake during a hunt. And that right there is how we may have gotten the birth of some of the myths that we can't even trace in our times, but like used to be the everyday for people way back. But again, it boiled down to this use of language, this ability to use this instrument called the human body to find ways to communicate with other human bodies, to create a system with other humans so that it isn't just a bunch of random notes and noises, but there is a pattern and an understanding and a comprehension on both ends, both the speaker and the receiver, that they're able to use a common template to begin things with each other. And again, every single culture has its own rules and approaches to this act of communication. They use different templates, they use different building blocks, but all of it ultimately is the same thing. It's conveying ideas and thoughts to another person in a way that is able for them to understand. And I don't think that we give communication enough thought, like especially nowadays where there's a huge emphasis on like digital communication, where we're no longer using the respiratory aspect of our human instrument, but maybe more so the tactile and percussive aspects, which has some upsides to it for sure, but ultimately might also be a hindrance, because there's something about, I think, hearing and interpreting and reading and translating language, especially if you're handwriting, that's a whole nother story, that probably like scratches some corner of the brain that is associated with memory. I know that critical thinking is definitely associated with reading, so it can only be, maybe surmised that there's a relationship between communicating, saying things out loud, and being able to interpret and understand them, as opposed to, reading them on a cell phone. I don't know. It is looking a bit bleak for physical human interaction, and yet it's also a moment of like hope and understanding that there will be multiple schools of thought that come about in the coming years, where some people will be on board and say we need more digital communication, and then we'll also have a lot of people who are saying instead of more digital communication, we need to go back to analog experiences. We need couriers again. Instead of emails, we need to give a message to a person and let them go deliver that message. I don't know. That could be fun, but that could also be strange, because you know what happens in all these myths and stories, right? Where there's a messenger, not often does the messenger make it. So maybe that is the message we needed today, is be proud of the instrument that you have and make sure to use it, because if you don't use it, you'll lose it.